You are listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. I'm Elena Paventa, Executive Communication Coach and TEDx organizer. With each episode, I'll share with you communication tips and ideas from top business leaders to help you excel in your career. Welcome to the next episode of Ideas and Leaders podcast. My name is Elena Paventa, and we have a great guest today. I'm speaking with Kimberly Gerber. She's founder of Excelerate, an executive development firm specializing in helping leaders to prepare for C-level roles. So today we're going to speak about executive development and executive leadership. Hi, Kimberly. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Oh, hi, Elena. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you so much.
So a lot of leaders are listening to us, and a lot of team leaders. And I think that all of them are thinking in the back of their head that maybe someday I will get to this C-level role. So how can you tell if someone is a C-suite potential as you're working with leaders a lot?
Sure. That's a great question, because a lot of times people think about, who's the best performer in the role that they're in. So if I have a team, who's delivering the highest output, who's getting the plans the best, and that's not always your best executive. So when we're looking at who's going to make the best executive candidates, of course, competence. That's going to be the baseline for anything. Do they, are they competent in their field? Are they knowledgeable? Do they continually increase their expertise on their own? Are they self-propelling in that way? And are they reliable? So we're looking for competence as a baseline. But then the other things that you also want to look for with an executive is, how do they show up in public? So do they have executive presence, or do they have the potential to develop executive presence? One of the things about being an executive that's different from any other level of leadership is that there is a lot of visibility, and you have very little room for error. An error made at an executive level in a public in a public forum, like with an investor or with a major client or with the media, those kind of situations come up much more frequently for executives, and they're hard to recover from. So you want to look for someone who's got the potential for executive presence. And it's not just how well can they present, it's how do they hold themselves in a room, how do they mingle with people, how good are they on the fly, and also just how do they network within a room. Not networking like in sales and marketing per se, although that's helpful background to have, but it's how do they work a room, and how do they demonstrate their leadership in every setting that they're in. So that executive presence is 100% something you want to look for when you're thinking, can this person make it at the C level? The other thing that you want to look for, and this is something that a lot of people don't look for, they don't know to look for it until it's too late. And it's the quality that I'll call grit, which is resilience. It's, do they have the self-leadership? Do they have the stamina? Do they have what it takes to make and communicate really tough decisions? Because at the executive level, you're dealing with those kinds of things every day. And in lower levels of leadership, and not necessarily low levels of leadership, but under the C level, you do have to deal with tough stuff. So, but you don't have to deal with it every day. I work with executives who are handling very difficult decisions every day. And we can't predict the world, and the last 2 years has shown us that resilience is essential in any leadership role, but it is one of the things you want to look for in a candidate. It's grit. And I want to say, it's not just getting through something, it's actually having the fortitude to almost be optimistic in the face of challenges, and not be, not let yourself get down, because as an executive kind of at that level, you really do have to absorb the stress of the organization. So those are the three qualities that we are always looking for. And there's other things depending on the role or the company, but those three are always competence, executive presence, and grit.
Yes, perfect. So I think that at a certain level, we can see competence, definitely. We can see who are those high potentials,
Yeah.
but the qualities connected with communication, with executive presence, they for sure need to be developed over time. So do you
Yes.
have any recommendations on how can we prepare those high potentials that we see that they might get there someday? How can
Yeah.
we develop them?
Well, there's nothing that replaces experience, period. So experience, it's if you have someone on a, it's on a short list. If you're thinking, I wonder if that person has it, are they going to be able to make it? It's give them some experiences, some exposure, and some very frightening opportunities and see how they do. It and then really pay attention to what the assignment is, whether you verbalize it or not, whatever opportunity it is. Don't just give it to them and then come back at the end and see how they did. Watch how they navigate the process of accepting the assignment, researching and getting themselves ready for it, how they actually show up and do it, and be looking all the time for, is this person the kind of person that can take any curveball that's thrown their way? So I encourage, and I often am helping my C-level clients, evaluate their teams and pick assignments and set up assignments and set up specific mentoring conversations so that those folks can be tested well in advance. And the value, one of the values of doing that is, one, you're going to get higher performance out of people because people really do love to be challenged in the right way. And so if you're having a conversation where you're trying to stretch somebody's skill set, you're trying to grow their capabilities, that's something people love, even if it means more work for them. Because it's different than just, hey, I'm busy, I need you to do this. That's a different conversation, and that feels a lot different. When it is, hey, Elena, I think that you'd be great at this. I know it'll be a stretch for you. Are you willing to take it on? Well, that's like so much better. And then, yeah, I'm going to make the room for that.
That
Then,
sounds much more motivating.
yeah, much more motivating. So it serves a lot of purposes to be thinking about and always grooming your team for the next level. You have to do it carefully. You need a plan, and your communications as an executive need to be on point because you don't want to set false expectations. But to start that grooming process earlier is the best way to go. You're going to get the best now, and you're going to be able to transition your folks later into accelerating roles with a lot more ease and success.
Yeah. Do you think that we need to tell them that we're grooming them, that we're preparing them for something, or
Yeah.
should we not tell about this?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it really depends on how confident you are in two things. One, how confident are you that the person's going to be able to make the leap? I talk about 5 leaps that people make going from a senior leader into an executive role. And so if as a leader, if you're 70% confident that this person can make that leap and they'd be your choice, you might start that conversation. However, if you're not there, don't start that conversation because you can end up setting expectations that you don't intend to set. And then you can end up with a retention issue on your hands. So you have to really evaluate, what that situation is. And so it's a sticky situation. The other thing has to be not just, are you confident in that person, but are you confident that there's a role coming up for that person in the next 24 months? It doesn't have to be, next month. It doesn't have to be next year, but there's got to be a reasonable window where that person can see that golden carrot out there. And if you're doing it just to do it, know that what you could be creating is capability that someone needs to now go work with and they're going to leave. So you want to be careful. It's a nuanced situation. We always want to grow our people, I think, to their fullest capability, but how we message around that determines whether they're going to be happy investing their talent with us in our group, in our company, or whether they might feel like, ooh, there's nothing left for me here. I have to go somewhere else. And so that's all about communication.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking about communication, I wanted to ask you about uh, mm, communication development. Do you think that at a certain point we can actually develop this skill, or is it only based on experience, or should we help people somehow in this direction?
The unequivocal answer to your question is yes. Yes, we should invest in developing people's communication. And yes, they can change and develop and grow at any age. Uh, at this time, Accelerate, we focus almost exclusively on executive development, but almost exclusively that is communication training. And in the early years of Accelerate, we were a communications training and coaching firm. So I am a wholesale believer that if people understand what their impact is and how they're coming across, and not just the negative ways, but the positive ways, if they really understood that and they understood their own communication talents, I'll call them talents and then areas of non-talent, because they don't have to be limitations. But if they really understand that, then they can show up in the right environments with the right mindset. Communication is all about mindset. And I've worked with people in their 40s, 50s, and sometimes even 60s that have changed how they think about people, or changed how they think about politicking in an organization, or changed how they think about collaboration. And that changes everything. They almost don't need so much communication training as they need mindset shifting.
Yeah. So when you work on communication with executive leaders, what do you focus on in order to, on one hand, to build this executive presence, and on the other hand, to work on interpersonal skills, listening skills, conflict resolution, and what do you think should be the area of focus for executive leaders?
Yes. So that is there's not one answer to that question. Where I always start with clients, and where I recommend people start with themselves and doing work like this, is style. Understanding, and not style, and I'm talking about like personality assessments. So like the Myers-Briggs or the DISC or predictive index. There's a number of assessments out there that gives you a starting point for thinking about what are you naturally strong at, and what arenas, what situations either trigger you or tend to not be your best environments. And there's a lot of things that you're going to look at when you look at an assessment like that. I personally prefer the Myers-Briggs because it kind of allows you to slice and dice information to look at interaction. How am I likely to show up for you? What are you likely to see? No matter what I'm thinking, what are you likely to see and hear from me? And then there's temperament. What do I value? How am I likely to assess a situation, to take, that thinking and feeling kind of dimension. So I always start with style because it gives us kind of I'll call it a loose blueprint for what we can expect going through the process. If interpersonal dynamics is the area for focus, we would really look at mindset. How are you thinking and valuing other people? How are you thinking and valuing yourself? There may be some self-discovery work to do there, usually is. If we're talking about executive presence, we might go into self-perception and then technique. So we do a lot of technique training in executive presence, because one of the things that I found that's kind of fun is that communication, you can fake it while you make it. And especially in the areas of executive presence, how you use your body, how you use your voice, how you use your posture will help you show executive presence, even if you're not feeling it in your head or in your heart. So you can do a lot with technique on the present side to, like I said, fake it while you make it. So those are two areas. I hope I covered that question the way you were hoping.
Yes, yes. And on this technique side, I think that as a communication coach myself,
Mm-hmm.
I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed that people very often, they don't express what they want to express. And especially, and I don't know if you have such experience, especially on the senior level,
Mm-hmm.
some people tend to be too professional, too
Mm-hmm.
serious, and they don't realize that they do this, but somewhere there is this assumption that the higher I go, the more professional I should
Yeah.
be. So
Yeah.
did you face this issue, and how do you work with this?
Yes. Yes. So it's interesting because on the one side, especially today with so many young leaders and young executives, we're actually working on gravitas, which is that seriousness, that, that kind of weightiness. And on the other side, like you're talking about, there are folks who are aloof. They're they don't show their fun side, and they're keeping everything kind of nice and tight in a box. And that can come from a lot of things. It can come from style, it can come from what they think they're supposed to be like. And it could just come from behavior. It could come from negative behavior, like their behavior being negatively reinforced. And so I always feel like that's a conversation about authenticity and about impact, and that's a conversation, that whole idea of what is the impact that you are having on your environment. And most people don't know what it is. So I teach many classes, I ask that question often: who can describe the impact that they have on people? And it's pretty rare that someone will raise their hand and say, this is how I think I show up in my environment. This is the impact I think I have. But once you start getting people sharing with each other how they impact, they can start to see how their behavior shows up. So someone who's very serious, that closes people down. It creates a barrier. That seriousness creates a barrier. Well, most people don't want a barrier. They want to be respected. And so we can play out different scenarios and give them different techniques to try. And sometimes you do have to try a few different things before you get to something that feels authentic and comfortable for you. But we've had great success with that. I love to see people try on new elements of their own personality and just be able to experience the way that people change their response to them. And it's interesting. I'm sure if you're a communications professional yourself, that you see this and you love when your clients are able to shift perspective, shift perception that other people have of them because they made just a few small changes.
Yes, absolutely. I think that sometimes it is enough to change one small thing, like eye contact or at the smile, and then immediately the effect is completely different, and people see
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Kimberly, I also wanted to ask you about those 5 steps. You mentioned that
Yeah.
you're speaking about those 5 leaps that we need to go
5 leaps.
through. So can you tell us a little bit more about them?
Sure. There are 5 areas of executive leadership that people don't think about. The we go from leadership, from supervisor to manager to team leader, escalating levels of leadership, and it's like a ladder, right? You build on your skills, team, project, cross-functional relationships. There's things that are added each step of the way, but when you get to the distinction between senior leadership and executive leadership, it's much more of a leap. There's much more of a jump. So there's 5 areas that we've broken down over the years, the 20 years that I've been doing this, that we've identified. There's 5 specific areas of a leader's life that there are major changes. So I'll go through them pretty quickly. The first is self-leadership. And there's a lot of things that go into self-leadership, but the leap is this: the pressures are much higher, so the stakes are higher, and there's nobody managing you anymore. So at a C level, sure, you have a board you're answering to, and you've got a CEO that's usually focused outward on the company. But at that level, you've been hired because you're an adult, you're at the highest level. And so people don't provide any more mentoring or check-ins. You don't usually have all of that type of um, uh, accountability at the level or the way you've had it in the past. Now you're the big boss. So your self-leadership leap has to be on point. You have to have self-regulation down. You have to know yourself, the strengths and the weaknesses, and you have to have a plan and support people to fill in your gaps. And if you're not confident enough to do that, or if you're not self-aware enough to do that, you can guarantee it will be a struggle and probably a failure. So that leap in self-leadership is huge. The second one is strategic leadership. And for some people, this isn't so much of a leap because they're strategically minded or they've been in strategic roles. But for, I would say, at least 80% of executives, the strategic leadership leap is significant. So now, instead of someone handing you the company strategy or the department or the division strategy, you've got to come up with that on your own. You don't have resources. You don't have someone above you saying, here's the game plan. You've got to come up with the game plan, and you've got to know what strategic thinking is and how to go about that. And if you're not naturally strategically minded, again, you've got to have self-awareness, self-confidence to get the resources and the people in place, because it doesn't really matter whether you do it or not. It's whether you got it done. So people get all tripped up in how they're going to support themselves strategically, but it's a huge leap. And the worst part is most people make that leap not understanding strategy and not knowing that they're not strategic. So it can be a flat out disaster for a lot of people. The third place is what I will call executive team leadership. When you are executive, the leap is this: you're no longer leading people who are looking to you for specific direction at the executive level. Now you're leading a group of very high level peers who are usually very strong willed and they want to run their own divisions and departments. And you've got to bring them together in a way where you're not telling them what to do like you might have in the past. You're not the one giving out the directions. You're the one getting the directions, getting the plans from them. And so leading that team in a way that really builds collaboration it's different than any other team you've worked with before. And so that's a leap, and people don't think that. People can be very good people leaders in whatever style they lead people, and then they get up to the executive level and they're like, I don't know why my team's not coming together. I don't know why they're not, they're fighting. I don't know why I'm not getting what I want. It's a leap because it's a different type of team. So those are the first three. Then there's organizational leadership. And this one is more about the what versus the how. Excuse me. When you're an executive, it's your job to lead mission, vision, values work and to role model it. It's your job to be a guardian for the culture of the organization and to develop programs and to take care of people. And before, someone was taking care of you, right? You were on the other side of that. And so now with organizational leadership, you've got to flip the role. It's almost like you were the child and now you're the parent. And so you've got to take on all those responsibilities. And the well-equipped leaders will do it proactively, and they will really become well respected in the organization quickly. People who don't know that that leap even exists, which is the problem with this one, they tend to lead like they have been previously leading, not understanding who they're all responsible for, and sometimes not prepared or not with the grit to make really tough organization-wide decisions. And so that can be a place of learning, and it can be a place of some failure for people. And then the fifth one is the one I think that most people expect but don't understand the complexity of it, and that is external leadership. It is all of the executive presence, building social capital, which maybe they haven't really had to do because their work kind of stood for itself, but it won't anymore. How to talk to an investor, how to present to the media, all of those things. The challenge here is they probably haven't had to do it before unless they were in maybe a marketing role of a certain kind. So very few people come into the executive role actually having experience with executive level external communications. So that's a huge leap. So these are all really big leaps. Now, the problem is that people don't understand the chasm between where they were performing really well as a senior leader and what's actually expected at that executive level. And the reality is that most companies, and this is true whether it's an internal hire or an external hire, is that most people expect executives to come in knowing that. They do. And in part because they aren't like the hiring managers, the other executives, they forgot about the gap or they were never aware of it to begin with. And maybe they muddled through for a couple of years, or maybe they had a different situation. But the reality is that executives often fail. There's very high statistics. It's over 50% of executives struggle and fail within the first 18 months in a first time executive role because of one of those 5 gaps or all of them.
Yes, yeah, and those are indeed quite big challenges
Yeah,
for executives because they did not face those challenges before, and this is
exactly.
something new for them, and we're expecting them to know everything.
Yeah,
So it is really great that you are providing those leadership programs for executives, and you are helping them in their roles. So, Kimberly, if our listeners want to know more about your programs, want to contact you, where can they find you?
they very easily they can email me at kgerber, Gerber, at the letter I, accelerate.com. And that's IEXCELERATE.com. And they can find me there. And I would be happy to chat with anyone who is interested as an executive or someone who is responsible for planning, creating that pathway for development and hiring executives.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this conversation about executive leadership and executive development. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. This is fun.
Thank you for listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. Did you enjoy this episode? Let me know that you listened by tagging me in your LinkedIn profile and using a hashtag Ideas and Leaders. See you in the next episode.